Imagine waking up one morning, grabbing your phone, and seeing the breaking news. The US dollar is now worthless. You check your bank account and the numbers are still there, but they mean nothing. Your savings, your paycheck, your 401k retirement fund, suddenly it's all worthless paper. Panic sets in and you feel a tightening in your chest. Grocery stores are packed, but no one can buy anything. Gas stations are deserted because fuel is now only traded for goods of value. It sounds like a scene from a dystopian novel, right? But history tells us that this isn't as far-fetched as it may seem. Let's rewind the clock to Germany in the 1920s, the Weimar Republic era. The value of their currency plummeted so drastically that people used stacks of cash to heat their homes because it was cheaper than firewood. Or think about Venezuela, just a few years ago, where hyperinflation was so severe that the price of a cup of coffee doubled in a single week. And Zimbabwe, at the height of their crisis, they printed trillion-dollar bills that couldn't even buy a loaf of bread. These are real events that happened to real people just like you and me. But what if, instead of happening in some distant land, it happened right here in the good old United States of America? In this video, we're going to explore what it would be like if the unimaginable became reality, if the US dollar became worthless overnight. How would it impact our daily lives? What would happen to the economy? And how would the government respond? Most importantly, could this actually happen? And are we prepared for it? Buckle up, because this journey is going to take us through history, economics, and the very fabric of society. And by the end, you might just see the dollar in a whole new light. Imagine if overnight the currency you've trusted your entire life, the US dollar, suddenly became worthless. Everything, your bank accounts, your life savings, investments, even the cash under your mattress, all gone, reduced to meaningless numbers. Sounds like a nightmare, but this is a reality that others have actually lived through. Let's take a trip back to Germany in the early 1920s. After World War I, the country was drowning in debt, and in a desperate attempt to pay off its reparations, the government started printing more and more money. At first, it seemed like a great solution, but soon the value of the German mark collapsed. Ordinary people found themselves pushing wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. In fact, there were stories of children playing with stacks of banknotes because they were worth less than the paper they were printed on. It reached a point where people found it cheaper to burn money for heat than to buy firewood. Or think about Venezuela. Not too long ago, it was one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America, with oil reserves that rivaled the biggest players in the world. But years of economic mismanagement and political turmoil sent their currency into a nosedive. At one point, retail prices were doubling every 19 days. Can you imagine your weekly grocery bill skyrocketing from $200 to $400 in less than a month? Suddenly, people who once lived comfortably, middle-class lives were carrying stacks of cash just to buy basic necessities. And we all know how dire things still are in Venezuela, with so many people, including even gang members, leaving the country in large numbers, many heading to the United States in search for a better life. Then there's Zimbabwe, where things got so out of hand that they started printing billions and even trillion-dollar notes. But even those astronomical numbers couldn't buy something as simple as a loaf of bread. Eventually, they had to abandon their currency altogether, and people started trading in foreign currencies just to survive. Now, these aren't just far-off tales from distant lands. They're stories of real people living real lives who once believed their money was safe and untouchable. It's easy to think that this could never happen here, not in the United States, but what if it did? What if tomorrow you woke up and found out that your dollars had become worthless? Let's dive deeper and see how this shocking scenario might unfold in our daily lives, because as history shows us, sometimes the unthinkable can become a reality. So imagine that morning when you wake up and it hits you, the dollar has just collapsed. What would happen next? Picture yourself walking into your local grocery store. Just yesterday, you could grab a gallon of milk for a few bucks, swipe your credit card, and be on your way. But today, the shelves are emptying fast. The prices are climbing by the minute, and the cashiers aren't even sure if they'll accept dollars anymore. People are scrambling, trying to trade whatever they have, canned goods, batteries, and even bottled water, just to buy their basic essentials. The familiar beeps of the register are replaced by the frantic sounds of haggling, arguing, and nervous chatter. Gas stations? Forget about it. Lines stretch for blocks, with fuel becoming a precious commodity. Without a stable currency, how do you even price something like gasoline? Suddenly, the credit cards in your wallet and the cash in your pocket are useless. The money you thought you had, it's gone. Poof, just like that. As the hours turn into days, everything we've taken for granted about modern life begins to unravel. Landlords aren't sure how to even collect rent. Employers can't pay their workers. Bills, they might as well be written on scraps of paper. And in the chaos, something incredible happens. People start to revert to an age-old method of bartering. Neighbors trade canned goods for firewood. Carpenters exchange their skills for a carton of eggs. It's a system that feels ancient, but in a world where the dollar no longer holds value, it suddenly becomes the most reliable way to survive. But this isn't just about people trying to make it through the day. Imagine being a small business owner. You spent years building your dream, pouring your heart, soul, and savings into it. Now you can't pay your employees, you can't buy supplies, and your bank won't give you a loan because, well, what does it even matter? The dollar's worthless. All that hard work, all that dedication, gone, wiped out by an economic tsunami. And what about the banks themselves? You know, those fine institutions we trust to keep our money safe? Well, they shut their doors, lock their vaults, and put up signs that read, temporarily closed. But in reality, they're not just closed, they're paralyzed. They don't know what to do either. Your life savings, the money you've worked your entire life to build, are now trapped behind those doors, inaccessible and essentially worthless. ATMs run dry, the stock market's in a free fall, and the value of retirement accounts plummets to near zero overnight. It's as if the entire financial system hit a brick wall at warp speed. What's left is a society grappling with the realization that the foundation they built their lives on has crumbled beneath their feet. And while the rest of us are scrambling to make sense of it all, there's one big question looming in the background. How the hell is our government going to fix this? Now, in times of crisis, all eyes turn to the government. And in this moment of unprecedented chaos, you can bet they'll be scrambling to take control. Picture this: a hastily called press conference. The president steps up to the podium, flanked by economic advisors, faces drawn and serious. Behind them, the American flag waves, but instead of a feeling of security, there's an air of uncertainty and even fear. The first words that come out of the president's mouth are something like, "We're doing everything we can to stabilize the situation." But what does that even mean when the very currency that keeps society moving is worthless? In the early hours, there might be talk of emergency measures. Perhaps they'll announce a freeze on all bank accounts to prevent mass withdrawals. Maybe they'll introduce price controls to keep grocery stores from charging a month's wages for a loaf of bread. But as history has shown us, desperate measures often have unintended consequences. Let's go back to the 1930s for a moment. During the Great Depression, when things got rough, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, which made it illegal for private citizens to own gold. Why did they do this? Because the government needed every ounce of gold they could get to stabilize the dollar. But can you imagine something like that happening today? The government coming to seize the gold that you've been holding on to as a safeguard against exactly this kind of crisis. Or consider the more recent 2008 financial crisis. Back then, we saw massive bailouts, trillions of dollars injected into the economy to keep the banks from collapsing. But in a world where the dollar is worthless, it's pointless to print more money. It won't be about propping up failing banks, it'll be about rebuilding the entire system from the ground up. There might be whispers of a new currency. Let's explore that. Imagine the government announcing the introduction of an emergency currency, something to restore faith in the financial system. Maybe they'd even peg it to a tangible asset like gold and silver, or even a basket of commodities, hoping to create stability. But could people really trust it? Would you? After all, the dollar was once considered as good as gold, and look where we ended up. As the government scrambles to regain control, martial law becomes a reality. We have curfews, checkpoints, and restrictions on movement as authorities try to maintain order in a society that's teetering on the edge of collapse. And in this moment, it's not just about fixing the economy, it's about keeping the peace, preventing civil unrest, and stopping the country from tearing itself apart. But even if the government manages to roll out some sort of emergency currency or drastic measure to restore order, one thing is for certain, trust is shattered. The unspoken agreement that money is worth something, that it's a fair exchange for goods and services, has been broken. Now, as America grapples with this new reality, the rest of the world is watching closely. Because when the US dollar falls, it doesn't just end at our borders. The shockwaves ripple out, and suddenly the whole world is asking, where do we go from here? While the United States scrambles to regain its footing, the rest of the world is watching with bated breath. You see, the US dollar isn't just any currency, it's the backbone of the global financial system. Countries around the world hold large reserves of dollars, using them to stabilize their own economies. So when the dollar crumbles, it's not just America that feels the impact, it sends shockwaves around the globe. Imagine being a business executive in Japan who suddenly finds that his company's contracts with American companies, contracts worth millions, are now effectively worthless. Or picture a small country in Africa that relies on US dollars for importing medicine, fuel, and food. Without access to a stable currency, entire economies could come to a grinding halt. Panic spreads, and in the blink of an eye, a crisis that started in one country has now gone global. International markets, which once hummed along with the confidence that the dollar would always be there, descends into chaos. Central banks around the world scramble to protect their own currencies, dumping the dollar reserves as fast as they can, hoping to limit the damage. But as more countries offload their dollars, the value plummets even further. What once seemed unthinkable, a complete collapse of the world's most trusted currency, has become a terrifying reality. In this void, there's a frantic search for a new king of currencies. Could the euro step in and take the crown? What about the Chinese yuan or the Japanese yen? Or maybe, just maybe, gold makes a triumphant return, reclaiming its place as the ultimate storehouse of value. Cryptocurrency enthusiasts might see this as their moment, the tipping point that pushes Bitcoin or another digital currency into the mainstream. But in reality, no one's sure which direction to turn. The world is grasping for stability, but with the fall of the dollar, there's really no clear answer. And while nations scramble to find a solution, everyday people are left to fend for themselves. Those with foresight who invested in assets like gold, silver, commodities, or cryptocurrencies might be able to weather the storm better than others, but for most, the reality is stark. Their life savings have vanished and the road ahead is uncertain. In times like these, we're forced to confront a harsh truth. The financial systems we rely on are only as strong as the trust we place in them. And when that trust is shattered, it's not just about losing money, it's about losing a sense of security and stability of knowing that the world makes sense. But how did we get here? Could this even have been prevented? And more importantly, could something like this happen in our lifetime? As the world grapples with the collapse of the US dollar, one question dominates every conversation. What can we trust now? When the money in your wallet is no longer worth the paper it's printed on, people start looking for something, anything that can hold its value. Gold, the ancient metal that's been a symbol of wealth for thousands of years, suddenly becomes more than just a shiny relic. It transforms itself into a lifeline. Those who had the foresight to invest in gold find themselves holding one of the only things that everyone agrees still has value. We've seen this before, time and time again throughout history. In times of uncertainty, when governments and currencies failed, gold remains a constant. It doesn't rust, it doesn't degrade, and most importantly, it's universally recognized as valuable. But in this digital age, gold isn't the only contender. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin begin to shine. For years, skeptics dismissed it as a passing fad, but now, in this moment of crisis, it offers something no government-backed currency can: decentralization and scarcity. There's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoins, and that fixed supply suddenly makes it a very attractive alternative. People start trading their worthless dollars for digital wallets, hoping that this decentralized currency can provide the stability that traditional money can no longer offer. Then there are other tangible assets: silver, real estate, even art and collectibles. Anything that isn't tied to the collapsing dollar becomes a potential store of value. Bartering networks spring up in communities where people exchange goods and services directly. It's a throwback to an earlier time, but in this new reality, it's a new way of life. But here's the challenge. None of these alternatives are perfect. Gold is heavy, difficult to transport, and hard to divide for smaller transactions. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, while offering a modern solution, still rely on technology, electricity, and internet access, things that could be in short supply during a crisis. And not everyone has a stash of silver coins or valuable artwork laying around. As people scramble to protect what little wealth they have left, we're reminded of one simple truth. There's no such thing as a truly safe investment. Everything has risks, but those who diversify, who spread their assets across different forms of value, are the ones who stand the best chance of surviving this economic storm. And yet the big question still remains. Could this really happen to us? Is this just a far-fetched scenario, or are we already seeing the warning signs today? It's easy to brush this off as just another what-if scenario, something that belongs in the realm of fiction or history books. But the truth is, the seeds of this crisis might already be planted. Take a look around. Inflation is up, the national debt is soaring past $35 trillion, and confidence in government institutions is at an all-time low. We're printing money at an unprecedented rate, and every time we do, the dollar's value gets chipped away little by little. It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck, and most people don't even realize it's happening. Think back to 2008 when the financial system teetered on the brink of collapse. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting to see if everything would come crashing down. The government stepped in, pumped trillions of dollars into the system, and for a while, it worked. But that fix came at a price we're still paying for today. Or consider what's happening right now with countries like China and Russia. They've been quietly buying up gold, stockpiling reserves, and making deals to trade in their own currencies rather than relying on the US dollar. Because maybe they see the writing on the wall. They know that if the dollar falls, they need a backup plan. But what about us? Are we prepared for the possibility that the dollar could lose its value? The truth is, most of us aren't. We've been raised to believe that the dollar is untouchable, that it'll always be there and always be worth something. But history has shown us that no currency, no matter how mighty, is immune to collapse. Does this mean you should start hoarding gold and converting all your savings into Bitcoin? Not necessarily, but it does mean that it's time to start asking questions, be more aware of where our economy is headed, and to take steps to protect ourselves. Diversify your assets, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Consider investments that aren't tied to the dollar, whether that's real estate, precious metals, or even starting a side hustle that gives you a different source of income. Now, these aren't foolproof solutions, but they're steps in the right direction. Because at the end of the day, we don't know what the future holds. Maybe the dollar will remain strong, and this will all just be an interesting thought experiment. Or maybe, just maybe, we'll wake up one morning to find out that the world has changed overnight. Remember, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The signs we see today echo those of the past, and while we can't predict the future, we can learn from what's come before. So I'll leave you with this. What would you do if the dollar became worthless tomorrow? Are you ready for that possibility? Or will you be caught off guard, scrambling to figure out what to do next? The choice is yours, but as history has shown us, those who are prepared are the ones who survive. Now, I want to leave you with one final thought. This isn't about predicting doom and gloom. The chances of the US dollar becoming completely worthless overnight are incredibly slim. But by exploring this scenario, I'd like to think we've gained a better understanding of how our financial system works, the risks we might face, and why it's so important to be prepared for anything. So take this journey not as a forecast of the future, but as a thought experiment to help us all stay informed and ready for whatever life might throw our way. If you found the video thought-provoking, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, comment, and subscribe to stay connected. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please let me know in the comment section below. And before you go, if you've enjoyed this content and want to support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon. It's a great way to help me keep making videos like this one, and you'll get some exclusive perks as well. The link's in the description if you're interested. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.